Hi, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Halaqa. This month the topic is ADHD. First, let me introduce myself to the people who don't know me. I am Meriem. I am a homeschooling mom of three little kiddos. I'm an early childhood educator and a homeschooling coach. And I love running this monthly homeschooling mom halaqa just to talk about relevant subjects for us homeschooling moms. And I also love having guests over. Alhamdulillah, Sana is coming for the second time. We already talked about ADHD and executive functioning in the first part, and it was so popular that people will actually just stop me when they see me. They're like, when are we gonna have part two? Alhamdulillah, finally we're able to do it. So I'm going to pass it to Sanat. You get to introduce yourself so we can get into it, inshallah. Go ahead, Sanat.
My name is Sana. I'm so glad to hear people found the last one helpful. I know it's been several months now, I think, but Alhamdulillah, I'm so glad that people seem to benefit from the first one and
Alhamdulillah.
it's beneficial too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Sana. I'm dual certified. I am a positive discipline parent educator, and I'm also a certified and licensed ADHD and executive function parent coach. And I have been doing parent coaching for, I want to say, the last 4 or 5 years now. And Alhamdulillah, I love it. I mostly work online, but I've started doing a few things here and there and now in the DFW area since I moved to Dallas 10 months ago now. So, yeah, like Meriem said, I came on this halaqah a few months ago. We started talking about ADHD and executive function, what they are, and hopefully we'll continue the conversation today. And we'll start off by doing a very quick review of everything we talked about last time. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Inshallah, whoever wasn't able to watch it last time, Miriam has the recording for it. So you guys are welcome to watch it there's an app, Miriam.
Yeah, so it is uploaded on the Muslim Homeschool app under the Homeschool Mom Halaqa, and I will upload this one as well, like within 24 hours to the halaqa. So you will see part one and part two, inshallah. Just so I say this before we move on, please write all your questions on the chat and then we'll address them at the end, inshallah, so we can just have the flow of the conversation going. Sometimes some questions just are asked a little bit early before we get to the point. So we're going to just type in whenever you get a question so you don't forget it, type it in the box, and then inshallah we'll go over it at the end for Q&A, right?
Yeah, it's great.
All right, go.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. You want us to start, or are we waiting for more people to join, or how do you want to
I
go
think
about
let's just start since we have the recording, and
it?
I
Yeah.
don't want to make it go all the way over 10 p.m. I don't want to take so much of your time.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Bismillah. All right, so we started talking about executive function or executive dysfunction and the social and emotional impact of executive function challenges on learning, motivation, and behavior. Last time, again, I said I'm going to go over this very briefly, but last time we started talking about what executive function is. And we said, to put it very simply, executive function skills are those that help us manage how we do what we intend to do. So, all the processes and mental skills that are required for us to be able to achieve our goals and do what we set our mind to do. And we also talked about how executive function skills originate in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is right here in the front part of the brain. It's also the last part of the brain to develop. And surprisingly, it fully develops by the ages of 25 to 30 years. And that's why, like, expecting a child to emotionally regulate themselves at the age of 4 or 5, or be able to organize and clean their room like perfectly at the age of 6 or 7 is not really age appropriate expectations. Not to say we can't teach them these skills, but these are the skills that usually tend to come last. It's always, we'll talk about how we can support it later at the end. But it's important to remember to keep our expectations from our children age appropriate as well. That's very important because if a child is showing you, this is something I always say, if a child is How do we know that an expectation that we have from our child is not appropriate for them? It's if we know if a child is consistently not meeting the expectation we have of them, that tells us that it's not appropriate for this particular child. Maybe it's appropriate for the other peers his age or her age, but for that particular child, that is not an appropriate expectation because maybe they themselves are not developmentally ready yet.
When we compare to siblings, oh, the oldest was able to do this, but the second is not.
Yeah. And then telling the child that your brother was able to do this.
Oh, God,
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
that's the worst. That protects
Yeah,
us, yeah.
yeah, that's really hard.
Yeah.
We talked about what does executive dysfunction look like. We talked about how some people who have executive function issues, they have trouble starting or finishing tasks, being able to sustain attention through a task, maybe have trouble keeping their belongings organized, and they struggle to make decisions. They lose things frequently, and they also struggle a lot with impulse control or emotional control. I'm going to skip over this quickly. Get to skip a few slides. Hopefully you guys will be able to go back where you need to be. All right, there we go. All right, so last time I think we covered a few executive function skills, and I'll quickly review them right here. So we talked about how if we think about executive function, it's the center for mental control and self-regulation. And several of the executive function skills we talked about were namely being able to initiate a task, activate. I hear feedback. Do you hear feedback, Meriem?
No, I can hear, let's say, the audience. Do you hear anything?
Was it only me?
I don't think so, but let's see. It takes a moment.
Okay, I'm not sure. I think when I'm talking, I hear feedback, but now it was quiet, so I'm not sure. All right. All right, I'll let you know if I hear it again.
Okay.
All right. So yes. So we were saying one of the executive function skills that a lot of people with ADHD can struggle with is actually initiating a task where you're able to begin a task without undue procrastination. An interesting thing that research actually tells us, which like it just blows my mind every time I think about it, is that when we talk about procrastination, I know everybody thinks about procrastination as a time management problem. Research actually tells us that it's not a time management problem, it's actually an emotional regulation problem. So the emotions that we feel uncomfortable for us when we think about doing something that, oh, I have to get up and wash dishes. It's the emotional regulating those difficult or uncomfortable emotions. That is what we struggle with when we are procrastinating and doing something that like else while we're supposed to be doing something else. So that's very, I think interesting. It's just interesting to remember that, which is why emotional regulation skills are a foundation for executive function skills, because once a child is able to modulate their emotions and monitor and like being able to regulate themselves on their own, it's like all these other skills can be built upon that emotional regulation.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah. I see it in myself, just like when you work for yourself, it's challenging because you have to put yourself out there and everything. You're your own boss.
Yeah.
I find myself when I don't do things, I only didn't do them because of the discomfort and all the emotions that come with it, not because of the task.
Exactly. Yeah. Gosh.
I love discovering about our emotions and how we stop ourselves from progressing, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And like I said before, we did go into all of these in a little bit more detail, but I'm just going to talk about what they are and move on. And at the end, I'll give some ideas of how we can, if somebody does struggle with these particular executive function skills, and how can we work with that. The second one we talked about was working memory, and that's basically like your brain's search engine where you're able to keep different bits of information in your mind and then apply them to a task. And this is what we need when we need to have conversations. So, like remembering what you said so I can respond to you appropriately. So, all of that kind of stuff, and being able to hold pieces of information. So, you're reading a book, which character was introduced when, all of that stuff. We want to be able to remember that kind of stuff as well. So, that's your working memory. Some people with executive functions dysfunction actually struggle a lot with remembering things. And it's like, why are you being so forgetful? What's wrong with you? Why can't you remember things? And it's not that they're willfully being disrespectful or disobedient. It's just that they have this particular weakness in their executive function.
Or we call it
Another,
distraction. Like we call it, you're
yeah,
always distracted.
yeah. Another one is being able to plan and organize things. It's basically when we can create and prioritize order and structure. Uh, One thing I will recommend, I think I might have this later in a slide as well, but one thing I always say is that if you feel like, I think actually I'll do that later. But yeah, one thing that has recently worked really well for me and for my kids too, when I want us to prioritize something, is I ask them, is this urgent or is this important?
Mm.
Because urgency implies time sensitivity, right? This is time sensitive. Something can be urgent, but not necessarily important. Something can be urgent and important. Something can be important, but not urgent. It's very important. So it really helps me. So if I need to pack my bags because we're traveling tomorrow, for example, and suddenly like this new motivation comes in me, I'm going to clean out my pantry today because that happens to me all the time. I get motivated for really random things. And that's like where I would like, I'll just ask myself, is this urgent or is this important? All right, now it's neither urgent nor important. So maybe I should focus on what is urgent, which is like packing for tomorrow.
Mm.
I'm reading this as comments. Yeah, so that would be where the planning and organizing would come in. Another
Yeah,
skill we talked about last time was our processing speeds. It's basically the time it takes for us to process and respond to things. And this includes like verbal processing, like if somebody's telling you something, like they're saying, can you go pick up your backpack and put your shoes on so we can leave for the masjid? And now for us, we're thinking we just told the child to do two things. But if the child wasn't able to process it in due time, some of that pieces of information might get lost, or they weren't able to hear it just in time where now because they're still thinking about what you said and you're already on the next task and you're like, did you hear me? I just told you to go put your shoes on. And like that's important to know that there's that verbal processing, that auditory processing, the being able to process our external stimuli like touch and stuff as well. All of that comes with this.
that's
And
when it helps when you get down to the level touch, like
yeah,
issues
yeah,
on because you're like engaging in different senses.
right.
And okay,
Yeah.
right.
Then I think we were talking about attention last time, as when I think around that time was when we stopped. And attention is, of course, like when we talk about ADHD, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, this is a huge part of ADHD, where we want the child to be able to sustain focus for tasks that are either challenging or might not be as interesting for the child as we want it to be. And it's important to know that most people with executive function issues can pay attention, but it's not always when they need to pay attention or for as long as they need to pay attention or on what they need to pay attention to. So it's not that they're unfocused, it's just that they're multi-focused. So you're telling your child, okay, go clean your room now. And the child is still, so his attention is, okay, what did my sister say we were going to play with afterwards? Oh, but I just remembered there's a loud sound outside. Okay, I'm paying attention to that as well. And oh, the tag on my shirt is really itching me right now. So the attention is there. They are paying attention to that moment. It's just that their attention is on different things at the same time, which is why they're not able to pay attention to the task that we need them to pay attention to, which was go clean your room, right?
Yeah, light bulbs, light bulbs. I love how you called it multi-attention.
Yeah.
It's not being like distracted or not being, I mean, it could be, but it
Yeah.
just multi-attention just makes it more detailed and clear, and also gives you more compassion to them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not they're being absent-minded or they're being
Mm-hmm.
lazy. It's just that
You
they're
don't
busy focusing on many things at the same time.
You don't, yeah, I'm thinking the language we use with older people or with younger, with the kids, is
Yeah.
that the older people will be like, you don't care, and the little kids like, you don't listen, you never listen.
Yeah.
But there's just too much going on in their brain, and they're paying attention to all of them. That's the difference.
Exactly.
I only pay attention to that one thing that's I know it's urgent or important.
Yeah.
For them, they need, it's not as simple as, you have to go through a process. It's not as simple as just, oh, this is not urgent right now, so I'll just move on
Yeah.
to the next thing. This is what's
Exactly.
urgent. I can make that process, that conclusion in a few seconds without even thinking about it. Like, it's quick. But for
Yeah.
them, it's not.
And it's also really important to know that just because something is urgent or important to us doesn't mean it's urgent and important to them. So for
Definitely.
us, getting out the house to be on time for an appointment is very important and urgent. But for them, the toy that they're playing with is the most important thing in the world right now.
Yeah,
So they might not just share the same values with you in that moment.
definitely. Same.
And again, the other piece about attention is that many people with attention regulation issues can actually focus. They can actually go into hyper focus when they're highly interested in the activity. So it could look like, I always give this example of that kid who plays with Legos for 6 hours and he forgets to eat in that time. And then he's very grumpy and like, why are you so grumpy all of a sudden? And he's like, I don't know why I'm so grumpy. I'm just very tired. And then you just realize, oh, he hasn't eaten for 6 hours or he hasn't used the bathroom in 6 hours. So that's because they can easily hyper focus on things that they are interested in. Again, the idea is that they might not just be interested in the things that we want them to be interested in.
Yeah.
And because they're struggle with that kind of attention regulation where they can't move their attention at the same pace we would want them to, sometimes they have trouble with transitioning. And when we talk about transitions, there are 3 steps to transitioning. There's, of course, when we need to stop the act. So if I ask a child, can you go please can you go put your shoes on so we can leave? For us, okay, I just asked the child to do one thing. For the child, first the child has to stop doing what they were doing. And if it was something that they were actually interested in, so that there's that emotional regulation piece as well, which means I'm a little frustrated that I have to stop doing what I wanted to do. Now I have to first use up some emotional reserves to manage that frustration. Then I have to stop doing what it was that I wanted to do. Then now I have to think about the new activity. Okay, what is it that I need to do? I need to put my shoes on. Okay, so maybe I need to physically move to get to the place where my shoes are. Maybe I need to first prepare myself mentally to be able to go with my shoes on. Once I get there, I realize, what shoes am I wearing today? What's the weather like outside? Do I wear sandals? Do I wear my sneakers? Okay, all of that. Again, like maybe for us, these are very quick steps because our brains tend to automate things. Brains are amazing, like amazing creations of Allah, where they're constantly trying to automate things for us. So we don't have to consciously think about steps. But for a child who's lived for 3 years, 6 years, 8 years on this planet, a lot of things that we automate, they haven't automated yet. So they might have to actually put more cognitive or emotional reserves to be able to complete a particular task. Well, yes, now they're going to put their shoes on. Now they have to sit down. They're going to figure out which shoes, and now they have to start that new activity. So all 3 of the steps can make transitions really hard for some kids, especially if they are neurodivergent and they struggle with transitions. And when we have a child that struggles with transitions, it might be a good idea to consider which step it is that needs to be addressed and how do we address it separately. And
Yeah, I
again,
wanted to add one little thing here that I've been doing at home, which is just making it easier for them. For the shoes, for example, I am specific on like put on your Crocs, put on your
yeah.
sneakers. We only have very few options, and the socks have to be right there because when we moved to a new place, we realized that, oh, I need to go back upstairs to get my socks. and they will never remember to get the socks out when they got dressed. So just lessen the steps, make it easy for them, like a no-brainer, and it will make your life easier and quicker.
Yeah.
And the second thing is I learned just from the last halaqa is that we were talking about hands-on activities and how the children, when they're learning a new hands-on activity, in order for you to understand the process of them learning it is if you try to do it with your left hand, for example, with your feet. Something that's very normal to you, you have to do in a different way. Then I remembered when you fall, I sprained my ankle a lot, right? And then I realized those normal things that I used to do, I can't just do them right now because I am disabled. I need to find a new way. I need to learn a new way. So it's the same thing for kids. They're constantly learning a new way and they're, as you said, making those automations. So it just, again, teaches you more compassion with the kids, understanding for their development.
Yep, that's right. Beautiful. All right. So going back to that piece of attention, like why are kids always moving, especially neurodivergent children? They tend to move a lot. Why is it that they're doing that? Some part of it has to do with, again, going back to self-regulation. They need to, especially if it's a neurodivergent child, like an autistic child, they tend to we know all the stereotypical movements where they flap their hands, maybe they wring their hands, they walk around in circles or spin or whatever. All of that movement actually helps them regulate themselves better. And one thing that we know now from brain science is that activity, like if you're rocking, if a child keeps rocking in their seat when they're trying to learn something, it actually stimulates the networks of the brain that control attention, which means that it actually helps a child pay more attention if we allow them to move. So a child who's constantly fidgeting in their chair, a child who's constantly rocking back and forth, or they're doing something with their hands, actually stopping them from moving so frequently and so easily and freely hinders them from learning, because now they have to focus on, again, going back to that multi-focus thing, where now they have to focus on not moving as well as listening to the teacher, which means now my attention is divided and I actually won't be able to listen to the teacher as well as I'll answer the questions at the end. Otherwise, I'll get distracted, I know. But again, some focus tools that are for kids can also be used for adults, which is people use fidgets these days. For me, I have this thing in my hand right now, which I'm constantly doing, so I can talk while to you guys. So anything that you can use, like a squishy, a squeeze ball, any kind of movement. Sometimes when I'm listening to classes, I tend to doodle a lot. I'll just be doodling while I'm paying attention. Some kids like using now there's something called jewelry. So it's jewelry that you can actually chew. So how some kids I don't know about you guys, but I know when we were kids, a lot of us used to chew on our pens or the back of our pens. So all of that actually tends to help us pay attention. Now they have jewelry for that. So
wobbly seats, those wobbly
yeah,
seats.
the wobbly seats, yeah, they are so helpful for some kids. It's so important. And again, it goes back to really noticing the child rather than the expectation. So if the child is not, maybe everybody else in the class is able to sit down and pay attention. But if my child is struggling, I'm going to pay attention to my particular child to figure out how can I support my child so he can have the best learning experience and the best social and emotional experience, really paying attention to that particular child's needs rather than just the whole expectation for the entire group. And of course, attention is more than just listening. It's three-dimensional, which means that when we are trying to pay attention, we must notice everything around us. We need to filter out what is not timely, what is not relevant, what is not helpful to pay attention to. For example, just right now, in this moment, I can hear the TV in the background in my house somewhere. I can hear the air conditioning in the background. I can hear a car passing by on the highway. So our brains generally tend to filter that irrelevant information out. But for some kids, especially kids who have very sensitive nervous systems or who have sensory dysregulation, they're not able to filter out that kind of information as well, which means now they have to work extra hard to pay attention or listen, because now they have to okay, not this, listening to that part now. You must keep in mind what you saw or heard as it relates to what you're currently experiencing. So we have to remember, so Sana was saying this 5 minutes ago. Oh, now it makes sense why this is what I struggle with, or this is what my child struggles with. So being able to hold that in your mind so you can make the connections that you need to. And then finally, while we're doing all of that, we're also managing our emotions so we can keep a cool head and not overreact to frustrations or excitement. And of course, we know this, and the impact of potential challenges is that every time a child or us, we come across a task that is boring, repetitive, or uninteresting, it's hard to pay attention. Uh, Again, remembering it's not laziness, it's not willful disrespect, it's just an inability to regulate attention for the child. And how can we support the child? I promise we'll get to the support part. I just want to get to as many attention executive functions as we can. And then we'll have a more general discussion about how can we support kids who tend, or ourselves, when we struggle with any of these. Another one that I want to talk about is flexible thinking. So this is something that even if a child is not neurodivergent, because of their age and the fact that their brains are so heavily under construction, they can struggle with it anyway, where some kids just tend to have more black and white thinking. So it's hard for them to understand that there's a gray area as well. So it's basically the ability to take feedback and adapt accordingly, shifting gears, finding new ways to solve problems. And people who do struggle with flexible thinking are the ones who tend to have trouble coping with change. So they'll get stuck, they won't understand why. It's hard for them to accept other people's ideas. They could argue the same point over and over again. Even when small things go wrong, it's easy to get frustrated because you were expecting things to go a certain way and now they're not. And because that black and white thinking is coming in, it just gets very frustrating. And because they're not able to be flexible and adapt to the new information they might have learned. So maybe last time when I tried to paint with watercolors, I added too much water, the paper ripped. And now maybe next time either the child has forgotten, or because there's thinking, so again, that black and white aspect where they're like, no, this is the kind of water I want, this is how much water I want to use, I'm going to do that again. And then again, the paper is ripping, again, I'm getting frustrated. But because they're struggling with that ability to shift gears and find new ways to solve problems, now they're making the same mistakes over and over again. And of course, if that happens, they're going to get anxious, they're going to get angry if plans change. And because they're so used to doing things one way or the other, if there are any unfamiliar or more complicated tasks, they will struggle more. Do you want to say something, Meriem, here?
I'm just taking it all in. It makes so much sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's just the fact that just this being exposed to this information that it is a thing, it has a label, it is something that people studied, just again gives you so much compassion. Wow, from my ignorance, I just thought that something is wrong with this person. Is this either disrespectful or why are you doing this to yourself? Or why are you doing this to everyone?
Yeah.
You're asking questions that they cannot even answer, and that just damage their self-esteem even more.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't even understand themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. One thing we say always is it's really not helpful to ask a child under the age of 6, like, why did you do this? Because A, they either don't know why they did it, or B, they weren't really sitting there thinking of the consequences of their actions. And now they're like, oh, I don't know. And also because they don't have any impulse control, right? Their brains are not developed to that point where they can have that impulse control. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we tend to do that a lot into other adults as well. There are a lot of adults who struggle with flexible thinking, who keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. And we're like, seriously, again, what were you thinking? And yeah, like you said, if we don't know why the human behavior is the way it is, it's very easy to label it, box it, throw the box away, because who wants to deal with complexity, right? All right, a big one. I think a lot of us can relate to this, even if we don't have neurodivergent children. Emotional regulation, right? Being able to manage frustration and modulate our emotions. we know emotional regulation. I'm not going to go too much into it. It's basically the person's ability to understand, accept their emotional experience, recognize what it is they're feeling, notice it in their body, manage those emotions, and then, of course, respond with appropriate behavior for that moment. Of course, people who do struggle with this, they tend to be more impulsive. They have a hard time inhibiting their reactions. They have a hard time with anger, raw emotions. It's hard to feel gratification, which is why they tend to struggle, have a hard time tolerating boredom or frustration. Again, going back to that attention piece where we said that being able to refocus attention also requires emotional regulation. So attention will also suffer if we don't have that emotional regulation skills. The last one I'm going to talk about is called self-monitoring. It's basically using self-talk to monitor and regulate our behavior and direct future actions. It's the ability when we are able to like lay out steps for ourselves. Okay, so last time when I left the house at 7:55 a.m., that meant we got late for school. So today I think we should leave the house around 7:30 and see how that goes. So that kind of monitoring our behavior and recognizing the consequences and actions of our consequences. Something we can do for our kids that is really important, again, neurodivergent or not, this is a skill that everybody should have, is basically improving that self-talk where we allow them to hear our thinking process, how we do things. Okay, so if I want to get out of the house on time, that means I need to start cooking dinner at this time, and then I will have my clothes ready at this time, and I will have the kids ready by this time. Okay, kids, what are the steps of what you need to do before we leave the house? What is everything that you need to finish? So the how, when, what, where, what you're doing, if we can live our life out loud, it helps them understand how to break down tasks as well. So again, when we're doing that, instead of telling them, go put your shoes on. Okay, what's the next thing on your list so we can get out of the house on time? Okay, what are the 3, 4 things you need to do before we leave the house? Not jumping in too quickly with suggestions and solutions, but helping them think about it. Because when we jump in too often, too quickly, we're just kicking the can down the road. We're not giving them an opportunity to learn the skills. And it's important for us to leave space to let them build their planning skills, regulating skills, reasoning skills. So some things like asking a child, what are you going to do about that? What's your plan for this? What's your plan for your homework? How are you planning on finishing this task? How long do you think it will take you? So just getting them to think about that stuff. And again, we talked a little bit about impulse control. It's basically the idea that instead of going ready, aim, fire, people who struggle with impulse control, they're like ready, fire, oops, I forgot to aim. So I love this cartoon in front of you that says how some people eat a box of cookies is I'm going to eat 1 or 2 a day so that they last. And how I eat a box of cookies is I ate them all while you were reading the first panel of this comic. My bad. That's when you struggle with impulse control and you're not able to. So the impulse control basically is you have a particular craving or desire, like for something. It doesn't have to be food related. It doesn't have to be anything positive or negative. It's just something your brain thinks of something. And before you're able to like really think about it, you do the action. A lot of kids struggle with this. Some neurodivergent children tend to struggle with it longer than some neurotypical kids, but like mostly a lot of kids tend to do struggle with it.
Okay.
All right. So if anybody wants to take a screenshot of this, I don't mind at all. These are all the executive function skills we talked about today.
I was gonna say, yeah, so for self-talk, for people who are already struggling to use it to regulate themselves, and then when we are being ignorant to the whole situation and we use negative talk to them, they end up just having negative self-talk about themselves. So even when they're trying to understand why they did a certain behavior or how to just progress and move forward, the baggage that they have, the library that they have to pull up from is all negative. So I saw it in real life when it just like they just keep digging a hole bigger and bigger. So it is very important for us, just the way we speak to our children or other people around us, to be very mindful of the way we speak to them and less from the blaming and all of that. Have communication and discussion and research instead of just throwing those blames right away.
Yep, that's exactly right. And yeah, I think you're right. And that's something I say to parents all the time, that the way we speak to our kids becomes the voice in their heads. So 20 years down the line, they're going to hear your voice in their head every time they make a mistake. We want to be cognizant of what they're going to be hearing 20 years later. So let's say they make a mistake. What are they going to hear? Are they going to hear, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you an idiot?
Yeah. And they'll just call themselves, I'm an idiot. I
Yeah,
don't know how to, I don't know what's wrong with me. Something's wrong with me.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. All
May
right.
Allah help us and guide us to the straight path. Yeah.
All right. So the thing is, so this is like this entire 2 hour thing that we did. It's like week one of a course that I plan on teaching for 6, 7 weeks. So I won't be able to cover like a whole lot of all of the executive function skills, but I do want to touch base on some of the strategies that I would highly recommend to you guys for yourselves and for your kids as well. The first one, of course, I think somebody had a question about this in the chat as well, and we can talk about this in a little bit, is like advocating for our kids. So if I know some people here might be homeschoolers, but some people might have kids in public schools or private schools as well. It's really important to advocate for our kids, and when possible, allow your child to witness you advocating for them, because we want our children to learn how to self-advocate as well. So recognizing that like speaking up for yourself, asking for accommodations, what to make life easier for themselves, that's not a weakness, that's not a failing, that is literally like what everybody does. Just because like their needs look a little different does not mean that their needs are any less. It's they need to be able to speak up for themselves as well. So advocating for them, like asking for accommodations in school. If a child has only ADHD, there is a 504 plan that a school you can request from your school, and the school is mandated by law to provide that plan and give accommodations for it. If your child has a dual diagnosis like ADHD or autism or something else, again, by law, the school is required to create an IEP plan, which is individualized educational plan. And again, schools will not tell you, but you can imagine the kind of accommodations you can ask schools for. But that is why it's so important to educate ourselves. So anywhere from asking, my child's not going to do homework. I don't want my child to do homework. Or as saying that instead of giving like 20 addition sums to teach the same skill, 5 addition. So he'll do 5. What if he can show that he knows that skill, he's mastered that skill in 5, he doesn't have to do the rest of the 15 questions. Because again, we want to work with the child with the way that his brain is, rather than just having a generalized expectation for the child. Asking for accommodations, classroom seating. Maybe if the child in the back gets distracted more by so many people, so many heads, what is this child doing? What is that child doing? Maybe asking for a seat in the front. So it's easier for the child to be able to pay attention. The teacher can keep an eye on the child, help them stay focused, provide accommodations as needed without the entire class knowing that child is getting special attention, because some children do tend to get more uncomfortable with that kind of unnecessary attention as well. So all of those things we can ask them. We can ask teachers to provide, I think it's, the second one, which is like asking them to chunk assignments for the child. What that basically means is that breaking a large task down into smaller tasks, saying when you, let's say the assignment for next week is write a research paper on Malcolm X. What the teacher can do for this particular child is that they can say, okay, in 3 days, I want you to give me 5 facts about the life of Malcolm X. All right, the child brings that in. The next 3 days, I want you to write me one paragraph about whatever it is. The next 3 days, I want you to edit and write the final draft. So that way you're telling the child exactly how to break down a particular task to make it easy for the child. Again, remembering the child could be struggling with working memory, they could be struggling with initiating a task. There can be different multiple skills that might be required that the child might not have. So chunking it down, breaking it down into smaller tasks can make it easy. Same thing for at home. Like we say, oh, can you go clean your room? The child immediately melts down. I don't want to clean my room. Okay, maybe the child is tired and they don't want to. Maybe the child just doesn't want to because it's a very boring task. Or maybe it could genuinely be the child doesn't know what clean room looks like. So telling the child, maybe, okay, why don't you go pick up all your books first? Okay, all the books are off the floor. Okay, why don't you pick up all your toys now? So like breaking it down for the child so they know exactly what it looks like. Even some people have had great success with having a picture of the way you want the room to look like. Take a picture of that room, put it on the wall or somewhere and say, can you match this room to look like this picture? So now the child actually has a visual where they're able to match, okay, this is not where these clothes belong. The clothes belong somewhere else. Where can I put them? Oh, I see the laundry hamper. I'm going to put them there. Rather than actually have to say, like, why? I don't know what to do with all these clothes on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's helpful for all the kids. My kids are different, and when we are cleaning the toys, for example, I always tell them, let's start with the big stuff to put it away, and then you'll start with the smaller things. My other child, as soon as I remind him that he can use his cranes or his trucks to carry the Legos, he's like, all right, I'm on it. I'll go do it. That's fun. Same thing as like having a picture, it just sounds like a challenge, like a game that I want
Yeah.
see how perfect I can get it to match, or depends on the personality. But I love those because they just give them simple tasks, and we don't rely on them remembering and giving us what. Oh, I think there's also some of the I don't want my parents to be disappointed. I don't want my
Yeah.
mom to be disappointed. So I don't know. I'm feeling paralyzed now because I don't know where even to start.
100%. Yep, that's exactly right. Or I don't want them to be disappointed, or that I don't want them to get mad at me.
Yeah.
If I don't, if I know that I haven't started it, that means I cannot mess it up. That's where the procrastination can come in because I'm having a hard time regulating my emotions of am I going to disappoint my parents or am I going to get in trouble? So just not even start the task.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Another thing that I just think it's so important, and I've realized the importance of it for myself recently, it's really made my life so much easier, is like externalizing information. That basically means it's get it down on paper. If you can see it, you can do it. If you can see it, you can prioritize things. If you can see it, you're going to organize your to-do list. But if it's all here, it's probably all going to disappear from the other side because it's so hard. But again, going back to that working memory aspect, if I don't have strong working memory, I don't remember half the things I'm supposed to do. So getting it down on paper is really important. So using to-do lists, using phone reminders. We use Alexa a lot in our homes. We're always like saying, okay, Alexa, set a timer for this, set a reminder for that. That helps the child with the transition as well as just like staying on task and remembering to do things. Another thing, another way to externalize is we might have heard this, a lot of schools use it as well, is visual schedules. What are the steps in getting ready for school in the morning? So maybe have a list that you have put on either the child's door or the bathroom door or the bathroom mirror, where if a child is younger, maybe you have pictures, or if the child's older, they have just steps written down, which is so when the child gets out of bed, brush your teeth. I have to change clothes. Or if you want to break it down, that means get clothes out, put dirty clothes in the hamper, brush my hair. So like writing down all the steps for their morning routine so that they know exactly what to do. They don't have to expend any mental energy on it. They don't have to make any decisions because decision fatigue is real. Everyone struggles with it. So just like knowing exactly what's coming next, it just frees up our mind and makes everything less overwhelming and less stressful.
More
So
automations.
yeah, exactly. And so yeah, externalize as much as you can, like using calendars, using to-do lists, using meal planners, whatever it may be. I recently did a live on my Instagram about how to set up routines and systems to make motherhood less overwhelming. If anybody wants to watch it, you guys can go on free from my stories and watch it from there. But in that, I talked about some of the things that I've recently started doing, which is what calendar I use for my family to keep track of all the million appointments. And also, I just have I call it a capsule meal plan, which is I've decided 5 days, this is what's going to be for lunch and snack and breakfast for the kids every day. I don't have to think about it. So every day I just look at that. Okay, tomorrow they're going to have chicken tenders for lunch for school, and they're going to have muffins for breakfast, and they're going to have this. So now I don't have to spend any energy on any of this. So that wants a copy of that, I have it on my Instagram as well. So you can literally copy paste the whole thing and make dua for me when you use it.
Will do, inshallah.
All right. All right. So another thing that is extremely successful for people who struggle with executive function issues and ADHD is what we call body doubling. What that basically looks like is we are buddying up with somebody to foster accountability. So for me, like how I use it is like even having my husband in the kitchen, even when he's drinking coffee, that actually can help me stay on task to clean the kitchen while he's there. Just like having somebody around, it helps us with that internal accountability and that ability to stay on task, because otherwise my phone will ring and then I'll remember, oh, I haven't replied to any email. And then I'll remember, oh, when I was checking my email last night, the pillowcase got dirty. Now I need to go wash laundry. And then like 30 minutes later, the kitchen is exactly the way it was supposed to be. But him being there, it helps me like stay accountable. It helps me stay on task. Kids can do that too. I have a teenage client. She does her homework in the living room, where her mom, when she's cleaning the kitchen after dinner, my client just sits at the kitchen table. She's doing her homework while the mom is cleaning. This way she doesn't get distracted and she is able to finish her homework on time.
Yeah, I have a funny story about this.
Yeah.
Not really that funny, but my husband had his office at home, and like when we just got our place, we literally split it in half. This whole half is your office, and this half is the rest of the house. But he always ended up in the kitchen counter doing work. And I could not understand that for the life of me. Why are you here? Because for me, it was distracting. It was like, just go do your work and I'll do my work. But now I understand, okay, he needed me to be there. He needed action around him so he can get stuff done. Or else he just get distracted with other things. And I'm like, wow, it took me, I think, 2 years to get that.
Yeah. It's amazing how the human brain works, subhanAllah. All right. And of course, this is pretty obvious, I think, but it's important to say. It's important for us to block access to distractions. Sometimes when I am cleaning the kitchen, I'll just go charge my phone in a different room. I'll put it in a drawer. If you're working on the computer, and then you know that Instagram keeps sending you notifications, maybe blocking Instagram for a while. If you're working on your phone or reading Quran on your phone, putting the phone on do not disturb, so that you're not getting all those extra temptations to distract you. Another thing that I think is important, especially for children who tend to struggle with the executive function, is that I think there has been research, I don't remember the exact number, that by the time a child with ADHD is 11, they have, I don't know why the number 300% is in my head, but they almost 300 times more than a regular kid, they've heard the word no, or they've heard something negative. I don't remember the exact word, but the idea is still the same, that it's exponentially higher than a neurotypical kid, where they're constantly hearing something negative about themselves, which could just be something like, what's wrong with you? Just listen, focus. Again, why can't you just pay attention? Look at your sister, she's doing just fine. All of that stuff, right? That is why I think it's really important to have a list of what I call a wins tracker. So every time you actually do accomplish something, even if it's something like I woke up and made my bed. give yourself a tick mark, like giving yourself that dopamine hit that, oh, I was able to accomplish something. Because a lot of times our brains tend to focus on negatives way more than the positives. So it takes, I think, 3 positives for us to overcome 1 negative. That's how our brain works. So it's important for us to really pay attention to all the positives we can gather and encouraging our kids to do the same as well. It's like the gratitude check-in as well, where we the more we practice gratitude, the more we practice shukr, the more happier we are. And like there's so many more benefits that science now knows about gratitude. So it's like that where you're just saying, Alhamdulillah, I was able to do this. Alhamdulillah, I was able to do that. Just it helps us feel better about ourselves. And we know that the better somebody feels about themselves, the more likely they're actually able to do anything and accomplish anything, because shame tends to cripple us and self-compassion and positivity tends to free us. So we're actually able to accomplish more then. And finally, it's important to set a consistent routine down, generally, as well as like helping the child write down tasks. Again, this comes under modeling a lot, where we can say, I'm gonna sit down and write down tasks that I need to do for today. Do you want to come join me? Maybe you can write down your task for yourself. Again, the whole planning the steps for completion. Do you want to write down exactly what you need to do in order to be able to finish this task? And then this is a big one for me, rewarding themselves when successful. So I'm not saying that you reward them. I'm saying they celebrate themselves. Big difference here, right? Why do I say that? Because we don't want our kids to become dependent on extrinsic motivation. So we don't want them to think that, oh, every time I clean my room, my mom gives me a popsicle. Because what will happen when there's no popsicle in the house? Child might not to clean their room. So we want them to build that internal motivation, that internal joy of having completed a task. So that, for that, what we can do is we can tell them. So my son is doing hifti, mashallah, and he recently finished a juz, and I said, oh, so what's your plan? How are you going to celebrate? And he's like, no, he said, Mama, what are you going to reward me? Now, I'm not going to reward you with anything. You want to celebrate yourself, well, you can do that. And he's like, how do I do that? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me, what do you want to do? And he's like, can we go get ice cream? And I was like, absolutely, we can go get ice cream. I didn't want him to feel like, oh, if I memorize the Quran, my mom's going to do something for me. So, no, this is for you. This is between you and Allah. I'm not a part of this. Helping them reward themselves and celebrate themselves when they do accomplish something. And there's
Yeah, that is a big difference.
yeah. And just remembering, executive function is among the slowest mental processes to develop. Some kids might eventually naturally catch up. Of course, it gets better into adulthood, but what's really required is targeted support and empathy. So what do children with executive function challenges need the most? Empathy for sure. That, like we were talking about earlier, like noticing the language we have, the more awareness we have of why children behave the way they behave, we're able to muster up more compassion and empathy for them. And when we're able to refrain from all that blaming and shaming because we just expect them to be able to do something, it makes their inner voice calmer. It makes them have a better relationship with us. They're actually feel safer and more ready to learn all these new skills we want them to learn. But the foundation always needs to be that empathy.
Yeah.
So they do need some extra support with skill building. They also need co-regulation. I talked about co-regulation last time, I think. It's basically the process of being able to allow the child to experience regulation with us, so that once they're able to experience that safety and regulation with us enough times, their brain develops enough neural pathways for them to be able to self-regulate later. So but like self-regulation, unfortunately for us, is not a skill that comes by itself. It's something they need to experience and gain through co-regulation.
Yeah.
And of course, all children need encouragement for their talents and passions. One thing I will say, and I didn't realize that I needed to say it, but now I think I should, is that allowing your kids to indulge in whatever interests and talents they have. So there's I recently had, sorry, I get a little emotional about this, so I'm like fumbling over my words. I had some parents consult with me recently about their child who has ADHD, and they wanted him to learn some social skills. And I was like, great, what does he like to do? And we've put him in karate, we've put him in swimming, and he just doesn't enjoy any of this. So he doesn't have any friends. And I was like, okay, so what does he like to do? And he only likes to play Legos. And I was like, excellent, put him in a Lego club. And they're like, what is a Lego club going to do? So what's our goal here? Our goal here is for him to make friends, right? Why does it have to be something educational? Why does it have to be something like a learning moment for him? Because the goal is social skills, right? So a child who's actually interested in something and he goes and he's around other kids who are interested in the same thing, he's more likely to get comfortable and reach out to those kids and make those connections because now they have something to talk about.
Exactly. They have something to
And
talk
it just
about.
made me so sad that they were so dismissive. They're like, not a Lego club. Like, how else can we work on his social skills? And I was thinking that's exactly how you work on his social skills. Hone in on his interest. Let him think his interests are important. There's nothing wrong with him enjoying something, even if it's not like math or even if it's not, as long as it doesn't go against Islam, like, why do we care? I thought
Yeah.
I would say this, like, please let a child indulge in their interest and their talents. There's nothing harmful about it, and it can only lead to good things.
And it just got me thinking back to my childhood and how we always had like seasonal games that we play. Just whatever it's sold on the market, or every few months you see all the kids are obsessing over something they're playing in groups. They're all interested in the card games or whatever collections. Or, like that doesn't happen anymore. The kids don't play anymore. They just like school and all these extracurricular activities that have to be a learning moment that just add so much structure again, like more activities that we have to go to and we paid for it and they have to go and God, like just play is being so dismissed. Just
I
regular
know.
play.
Yeah. I think it's such a tragedy of our times that we're always trying to build kids' skills and we're working on some kids need that extra occupational therapy or something, but there's or like play skills, people go for play skills and people go for communication skills and pragmatic skills. And there's so many ways to like target these areas, which is great. If a child needs support, they should absolutely get
Hmm.
support. But I think we discount the role of play in all of these skills because a child who's allowed to deep free play, where it's like 45, at least 45 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, walking outside, being in nature, being in with kids, having like arguments, being able to like work through conflict and I don't like your idea. Let me practice my idea. All of those things are just so crucial. But when they're constantly under adult supervision, the minute like there's conflict, they're like, oh, don't talk to your friend this way. And
Hmm.
like, oh,
And we're
there goes
so
that.
worried to offend the parents.
Yeah, exactly. And so I agree with you. I think it's a great tragedy of our times that we don't allow free play and we're so like bent on supervised play all the time. It's just
Yeah.
sad. Outdoor play is where it's at. Everything is there. That's what I
Yeah.
think. All right. And of course, going back to that need for physical activity, movement, remembering that, again, kids with sensitive nervous systems, they do tend to accumulate stress in their bodies more. One way to work through a stress cycle, especially for kids, is increased activity. So allowing kids that, again, that extra movement, that physical activity, being outdoors in nature, free play, all of that stuff is really great. And
Yeah.
of course, not to discount the very huge importance of proper nutrition, sleep. All of that is just really important because, again, if our physical needs are not being met, all of these emotional skills, these cognitive skills, they won't like they won't have a foundation to be built on if the physical needs are not being met.
Yeah.
So
Now that slide, if just you can go back to the slide so
yeah,
you can make sure to take a picture of it. Because when I look back at all the things that I did with my children, especially the one that I think needs more help with
yeah,
building the executive function skills, and all of these, the patience from me
yeah,
comes from learning about this
exactly.
and understanding that co-regulation is actually how he's going to learn. Because as I said last time, is I was always wondering, am I disabling him by just co-regulating with him that maybe he will never know how to do it himself? But as
Yeah,
you said, he learns from experiencing it, not by hearing a lecture about it.
yeah,
He needs
yeah,
to experience it and feel those emotions to learn how to go back to them and find them again. So yeah, like playing, I have a movement zone at home. I always spoke about this, that even if you cannot go outside, just at home, you have to allow them to do something. If you have the space, have some jumping things around. If you don't have the space, and actually just stumbled upon a picture from a few years ago where I used to put a few big jumbo pillows under my couch. So in case they fall, they don't get hurt. But
yeah,
that was the only space we had. So play there. That's when you do movements and sensory bins, play in the
yeah,
dirt. Of course, nutrition and sleep. Sleep is very important. If you're a kid, you always say, oh, my kids don't want to sleep early. One thing that always worked for me and other clients is that just bump it up a little, 10 minutes, 15
mm,
minutes and you will find that good sweet spot when they get to sleep easily and they get to actually sleep through the whole night and get like the amount that they need. So yeah, this slide is perfect. It has everything that you'll need, inshallah, to help your child.
yes, yes. Thank you. All right, so I know we're out of time, so I'll quickly go over this. What can we do? It's always rather than assuming why a child is doing what they're doing, it's important to be curious. Even saying, I wonder why you did this. I wonder what you're feeling right now. Getting them curious about their experience as well tends to help with that self-monitoring and self-talk. Again, going back to the idea that we have to be a non-judgmental observer and instead of being an emotional judge where we're saying, why are you always so angry? Being an emotional scientist. I wonder what it is that you're feeling right now. I wonder where you're feeling anger in your body right now. So acting more like a scientist rather than being a judge. And then staying in the present moment, recognizing that where your child is right now doesn't mean they will be there in another 10 years. It doesn't mean they're going to be there in another 10 months. Even children are constantly, their brains are developing, growing. So staying in the present moment and not giving into your fears about like, oh, if I help him right now, does that mean I will need to help him in 20 years as well? Like really trying to be as mindful as we can. And lastly, this is so important, parenting the child that is in front of you, rather than the child that you thought you would have, rather than the child that you wish you had, rather than the child that is the child like the next door kid, parenting the child that you have, the child
Cousins,
that
yeah.
Allah gave you, because Allah is the best of planners and He gave you the child that He knew you could handle and He knew you could be the best parent of. So, parenting the child that's in front of you rather than like we all have dreams about how we wanted our kids to be, and uh, Allah plans and His plan is better than ours. So, just like reminding ourselves of that. We're done. Yes. Okay. This is my information. I think somebody was asking about my Instagram. It's called Free from My Stories. That's my email, my phone number. I'm on WhatsApp too. If you guys ever need me, just let me know. You can take a screenshot of this if you need to. And now I can answer questions. Do you want to stick around for answering questions or are we
Yes, yes. So whoever wants to stay, they can stay. Inshallah,
okay?
we'll go back to Ikhlas is the first question.
Yeah. All right. Let's
So
see.
Ikhlas says, does my ADHD reflect on my children? Me not being able to clean properly and finish, will this be passed on to my kids? Because I can see that happening already. They can't seem to finish a task, but they will clean when they are motivated.
Yeah. So the thing is, whether we know it or not, we're always modeling things for our kids. So whatever our kids see us do, they will do that. There's a famous saying that kids do what they see, not what you tell them to do. So even if we are telling them, go clean your room, and our room is a complete disaster, they're going to learn more from that than from just what we're lecturing to them about. So there
Yeah.
is definitely that aspect where children will pick up the skills that we modeled for them. Does that mean your ADHD can, if a child neurologically does not have ADHD, can they develop ADHD through yours? I don't think so. I think kids can intrinsically develop those skills if they don't have that neurology, because ADHD, from what we know so far, it is a genetic and neurological state. Yeah, I think, but it is, of course, something that if they haven't seen anybody emotionally regulate themselves in their entire lives and they don't know what that looks like, so then, of course, they won't be able to practice that skill because they haven't experienced it, they haven't had anybody model it for them. So yeah, my answer is yes and no.
Yes. Also, I thought about the fact that you're going to be learning as a mom, and like just an adult, you're going to be learning how to teach yourself how to do these new things. And there's nothing wrong with including your children while
Yeah,
you're learning these things. Like just telling them that I'm actually not happy with the way I'm doing these things, so I'm learning how to do it this way. So share your process out loud. It's been very helpful to me for so many ways. And I'm pretty sure they will learn. That's part of modeling. They will learn how to think and how to solve these problems.
exactly. And what excellent modeling it is, right? The fact that we're showing our kids that it's okay to be imperfect, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it's okay to ask for help and learn new skills and grow, because we want them to know that we want them to be lifelong learners, and they will become those lifelong learners when they see us be a lifelong learner. So if
Yeah.
at age 36, I am like working on my executive function issues, like that's excellent modeling for my kids, because now they know they don't have to be perfect all the time. They don't need to have all the answers all the time. And that if things haven't been going well when I'm doing things a certain way, there's always room to change things. And we don't have to be stuck in a certain way.
Yeah.
Modeling that flexibility for them is really important too.
You just connect with them even more. They have something to ask you
Yeah,
about, to talk about. Um,
exactly. Beautiful. All right. So what are some, go
just
ahead.
myself, like you said, all my friends, because I always say all my friends have it, but not me. And it's true. I still didn't find a friend who doesn't have it.
That's
And yeah, no, it's just there are some things that like I will do that look like ADHD, but it's not, just because of the amount of work that we have to do as moms and the amount of distractions, and the little kids all mommy from all different
yeah.
ways. But I can tell 100% that it is not. I was able to sit through this whole time just closing my hands and I'm listening to you. So,
Yeah, and I think we do all like have varying degrees of executive function
mhm.
skills. Some people have some things mastered better than others. Then some areas are areas of weakness for everybody. But it like counts as ADHD if there's a certain pattern in like different like executive function issues and ADHD issues and attention issues. And for some people, there's like that hyperactivity component as well. And so for some people, there's that impulse control as well. So there is a lot that goes on in being able
Yeah.
to identify somebody as ADHD. So yeah.
Yeah, I was also remembered that when I was younger, like maybe 10 years old, I always imagined my brain as a set of drawers. Like I had multiple drawers where when I need something, I'll go to a certain drawer, open it, and get what I want from there, like that information that I needed. I'm like, that sounds organized.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
I never thought about it until recently, but I'm like, I always imagined my brain like that because that's how it feels it works.
Yeah,
I don't feel it like going fast in different directions or
yeah,
multi-focus on different things.
great. All right, so what are some focus tools for adults? So there are different things. It depends on what particularly that it is that you're struggling with. Like I said, fidget toys can help some people benefit from it, some people don't. If it's you can doodle, you can, like for me, I know that when I'm doing something hard, I tend to rock my body and just allowing yourself to have that movement, because so many of us grew up being told, sit still, we've automatically associated some shame with movements, like allowing yourself to have that movement. If you are the sort of person who enjoys exercise, like that tends to really keep the endorphins running. So that keeps also helps with general focus in life as well. So all of that can be helpful, inshallah. Okay, Ryan is asking, how can we request school to let them be flexible
Right.
learners and not focus on the duration, but rather the quality and effort? I think it depends on whether you have a diagnosis for the child or not. In this way, a diagnosis actually makes things easier because once you request that 504 plan or the IEP, you can literally put anything and everything under the sun in those plans, depending on the school district as well. Some districts are more accommodating than others based on their resources and what they have. But I think what really helps generally, though, even if your child doesn't have a diagnosis, is establishing a relationship with the teacher rather than worrying about the entire school. Having a relationship with the teacher. Teachers are extremely overworked creatures, unfortunately. Acknowledging what they're doing, appreciating them, being vulnerable with them. Vulnerability tends to really help with connections. Having that kind of a relationship, and instead of telling them to do this, having those requests and having conversations, asking them, do you think this would help if we tried XYZ with my child? Like really building a relationship rather than like having a top down approach that I want you to do this for my child, and I'm giving them some ideas to experiment with, because a lot of times because teachers are so overworked, they don't really want to think about one more thing to do for one particular child. So if you tell the teacher exactly what you think would help the child and say, you know what, in other classes or in other schools, XYZ has really helped my child. Do you think we can try that in your classroom as well? And then the teacher might actually be more interested in trying it out rather than having to think about it herself on how to
Yeah.
accommodate one particular child.
Especially if she has multiple children
Ah,
getting the same
exactly.
attention. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other question was from Mesa. Do you mind speaking more about dealing with emotional regulation that leads to procrastination?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just got distracted by Ryan's comment. I think she was asking about Instagram. So yeah, it's free from my
Instagram,
stories.
right?
Yeah. So Maisa said about emotional regulation. So the thing with procrastination is, let's say I have to go clean my kitchen because it's nighttime and that's all I can do right now. So if I have to go clean my kitchen, but I'm tired, so in this moment, I have to deal with several emotions, right? So there's exhaustion, there's that physical exhaustion. Oh my goodness, I don't want to get up and do that. Then there might be some resentment there that, like, why should I have to clean at this time when I'm so tired already? Then there might be, what am I doing right now? Maybe I'm scrolling on my phone. The phone gives us instant dopamine, which means my reward system in my brain is like firing like crazy. Why would I want to stop that constant dopamine to go do something that's extremely boring? So all of that requires me to be able to regulate my emotions in this moment so that I'm able to do something that I might not necessarily want to, even though it's important. I'd want to tomorrow. Future Sana would be very happy with present moment Sana if she wakes up to a clean house. But present moment Sana is struggling with modulating those emotions and regulating them because she doesn't want to deal with this present issues. So that could lead to procrastination. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, that was the last question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sana. This was so, again, very enlightening and so many light bulbs went through. And inshallah, alhamdulillah, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us and staying with us for almost 1 hour and a half. And it was amazing. I think everybody stuck around, so everybody enjoyed it, and also they learned so much. And do you have anything how you can support people? Like maybe they can reach out to you on Instagram, or do you have anything going on right now? Can let us
Uh,
know.
so no, right now my life is so busy right now that I'm not like, I do teach some online courses, but I'm currently in the midst of one, so I don't see a new one coming up soon. But yeah, if somebody has any questions for me, I do one-on-one consults with parents, so I do Zoom calls. I don't think I've done an in-person one-on-one consult since I moved to Dallas, but who knows? If somebody lives in the Irving area, I don't mind. But yeah, so you can reach out to me on Instagram and or my email and phone number was there too if anybody needed that. And we can do one-on-one consults. And I can also like I do share on my Instagram every time I start a new parenting course. It's an 8-week course that I teach. So if anybody's interested in that, you guys can do that. It's covers like general parenting as well as I focus on neurodivergent parenting neurodivergent children as well.
All right. MashaAllah. Thank you so much, Sana. That was very helpful and insightful. Inshallah, we can get together again. Noor wants your slide. Yes. You guys can take a picture of it. And alhamdulillah, Instagram is very helpful.
All right, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good night, everybody. Salaam alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Take care.
Jazakallah khairan.
Bye.